go on. Philosophy is oftentimes regarded as an ivory tower discipline, as a discipline with those who have too much time on their hands, who have luxury of having a first world Western type of arrangement. But the problem is this: philosophy has gotten that image by mass misrepresentation from a few of its institutional practitioners. Western philosophy particularly suffers from this problem. And there are a litany of critiques from many different philosophers throughout history about how philosophy is taught in the West. Some critique Western philosophy for not emphasizing Eastern philosophy very much. Some critique Western philosophy for being too narrow or for having a certain methodological approach. There's a group of people that think that the analytic approach that was one of the more recent philosophical approaches, is the dominant approach of all proper philosophy. And you have people like Bertrand Russell who kind of represent that tradition as far as I understand. But really, regardless, all of that stuff is secondary. All that stuff is utterly secondary. Philosophy begins, as the old phrase says, in wonder. Philosophia. Philo being love, Sophia being wisdom, the Greek word for wisdom. If you have the ability to love, as all human beings do, it's a universal affection. And you have the ability to also apply your love to particular goals or desires, aspirations. Wisdom is an aspiration. So the philos of wisdom, philosophia, every human being has the ability to aspire for wisdom, and at the same time love the process of that aspiration. If you are a lover of aspiration, particularly aspiration to higher ideas, particularly wisdom, you're a philosopher. I don't care if you have a PhD and you've been teaching at Yale for 20 years and you have tenure, or you're a guy on the street corner thinking about the meaning of life. The only thing that separates those two is status. But this is not a society, or at least we shouldn't be a society of status. We should be a society that emphasizes spiritual values over material conditions. Status is a material condition because status is assigned to a particular person and it reflects some sort of social classification about them. But what all of us have in common, remember, going back to the universal, philosophy is concerned about the universal. Going back to the universal, what everyone has is the ability to love and aspire. What everyone has is the will. And if you apply the will to loving wisdom, and you apply the will to wondering about different things about the universe, what you'll then find is that philosophy really respects the spiritual value of man. Spiritual being that man has certain processes that are a part of his existence that no one can see unless he reveals them. And when someone makes a conscious decision to pursue wisdom, they are exercising their spiritual faculty of the will. Because no one can really see our will, how strong it is, how dynamic it is, unless we apply it. It's like a hammer. Yeah. No one can really see the consequence of a hammer unless it's applied. So to me, the difference between the guy on the street doing philosophy and the guy in Yale doing philosophy is that one of them exercises, or at least has more potential, one of them is solely exercising their will of loving aspiration or wisdom, whereas the other may be doing that, but he's doing that in the context of a political environment in which he's getting paid, in which he has to follow office politics, in which he has to appease a board of people, in which he has to follow university standards. In one sense, there's one guy with guardrails, and the other who doesn't have as many guardrails. He may have natural barriers in life, but the guardrails are not institutional. As much as
complete freedom to kind of pursue whatever he actually thinks, say what he actually wants. Yeah. And
exactly.
There are people that kind of, what you were saying between those two polar opposites in a way, or the two extreme ends of it is all the rest of us in the middle. We all believe something about the world, about ourselves, about our relationship to it, our relationships in general, our families, our, what is it right to purchase or avoid behaviorally. This is all philosophy. This is all the ideas that we have about the world. In a way, the nature of being human, you can't help but be a philosopher, whether you realize it or not. And the more you consciously do it and choose to examine yourself, the better you get at it. The more pitfalls you can avoid, just in general.
Yeah.
So,
Whenever someone says I'm having an existential crisis, they're being a philosopher. Even
mhm.
if they're not being a particularly thoughtful one, or they're just scared, and that's okay, because
Or
all of
whether or
us,
not they use
again,
that term, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Because if you know how to use that term, or you have an idea of what that means,
Hmm.
you know more about most people than about philosophy, but what it means to examine the meaning of your life in the big picture, right?